Here's a 1600-word emotional, storytelling-style article written as a seamless flow, no headings, crafted in a way that fits perfectly for a YouTube-long video narration, keeping viewers engaged until the end. The city lights flickered against the night sky as Richard Hale, the CEO of one of the largest hotel chains in the country, walked quietly through the lobby of one of his properties. To the public, Richard was a man of power, wealth, and influence, a self-made millionaire known for his relentless drive. But tonight, he wasn't wearing a tailored suit or being chauffeured in a black car. Instead, he wore the uniform of a cleaner, blending in with the staff, unnoticed, as part of an undercover initiative he had begun in secret. His goal was simple: to understand the struggles of the very people who worked tirelessly to build his empire. Richard had always believed that success was built not only in boardrooms but in the lives of ordinary employees. For weeks, he had rotated through different roles: kitchen staff, front desk attendant, janitor, listening, observing, and quietly lending a hand. That night, he chose the role of a night cleaner. He carried a mop, pushed carts of supplies, and picked up discarded cups, unnoticed by guests who walked past him. It was during one of these shifts that something happened which would change his life forever. In a quiet corner of the laundry room, he heard a faint sound, someone crying. Curious and concerned, he followed the sound until he saw a woman, dressed in the plain uniform of a maid, sitting on a small wooden bench. Her hands covered her face as tears streamed down, muffled by the noise of industrial washing machines. Richard paused, uncertain if he should intrude, but the sight pulled at his heart. Slowly, he approached and softly asked, "Are you okay?" Startled, the woman quickly wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "I'm fine," she whispered, forcing a smile that betrayed her pain. Richard gently insisted, "It doesn't look like you're fine. Sometimes it helps to talk." For a moment, she hesitated, then finally spoke. "It's my son," she said, her voice breaking. "He's been in the hospital for 2 weeks. The bills are piling up, and I can't pay them. Every shift I work, every extra hour, it's still not enough. Tonight they called me, asking for another payment, or they won't continue his treatment." Her words hit Richard like a wave. He felt the weight of her pain, the crushing burden she carried alone. She wasn't just an employee working long hours to keep the hotel clean, she was a mother fighting desperately to save her child. Richard swallowed hard, forcing back the emotions rising in his chest. He wanted to tell her who he was right then, that he could fix everything, but he knew the moment required listening, not power. "What's his name?" he asked gently. She whispered, "Ethan. He's only 9 years old." The sincerity in her voice and the despair in her eyes shook him. Richard had built an empire, yet in that small laundry room, he felt powerless in the face of raw human suffering. But deep inside, he made a silent promise that he would not let her story end in tragedy. He finished the rest of the shift beside her, helping her fold sheets and stack towels, offering quiet words of comfort. By the time the sun rose, she thanked him for listening, unaware that the man she spoke to was not just a fellow worker, but the head of the company. That week, Richard couldn't get her story out of his mind. He visited the hospital in secret, searching for Ethan. When he found the boy, he saw a frail child with brave eyes, hooked up to tubes, smiling at the nurses despite his weakness. Richard stood at the doorway, overwhelmed, and realized that no child should face such uncertainty, and no parent should be crushed by the weight of financial despair. Without revealing his identity, he met with the hospital's administration and quietly settled Ethan's bills. Not just the overdue payments, but every cost needed for his complete recovery. A few days later, the maid came to work with her eyes wide and her hands trembling. She told her coworkers that the hospital had called, informing her that her son's bills had been paid in full. "I don't know who did this," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "But it feels like a miracle." Richard, watching from across the room, said nothing. He wanted her to believe in hope, in kindness, in the possibility that the world could still surprise her with goodness. Weeks later, when Ethan was discharged, the maid returned to work, carrying a picture of her smiling son in her pocket. Richard, still undercover, continued to mop floors beside her. One evening, she turned to him and said, "I don't know who you really are, but you're not just a cleaner. You listen differently. You carry yourself differently. Whoever helped me, I wish I could thank them." Richard simply smiled and replied, "Sometimes the people who help us don't want thanks. They just want us to keep going." But the story didn't end there. Months later, Richard revealed his true identity to his staff during a company-wide meeting. Standing on stage, Dressed not as a CEO but as a man humbled by what he had learned, he told the story of the maid and her son. Gasps filled the room as the employees realized that their CEO had walked among them in disguise. The maid, sitting in the audience, covered her mouth in shock as Richard finally said, "It was me who paid Ethan's bills." But it wasn't charity, it was responsibility. Because your struggles are not invisible, and your sacrifices build the very foundation of this company. Tears filled the room, not just from the maid but from countless employees who had their own silent battles, their own hidden burdens. That day, Richard announced a new program, a company-wide fund to support employees in times of medical and financial crisis, so that no one would ever face such despair alone again. He pledged part of his personal fortune to ensure the fund would never run dry. The maid walked onto the stage, her hands trembling, and hugged him tightly. "You didn't just save my son," she said softly. "You saved me." The applause that followed echoed through the hall, not as a celebration of wealth or power, but as a testament to the strength of compassion. In the months that followed, stories poured in of employees receiving help during emergencies, rent assistance, medical treatments, education scholarships for children. The company's culture transformed from one of silent endurance to one of shared humanity. And Richard, once known only as a powerful CEO, became known as a leader who listened, who walked in the shoes of his workers, and who changed lives not with contracts or profits, but with empathy. The maid's son, Ethan, grew stronger each day, his laughter a constant reminder of what kindness can achieve. For Richard, the undercover journey had revealed more than he ever expected. He had gone searching for insight into his business, but what he found was something far greater, the truth that leadership is not about authority but about responsibility to those who depend on you. Years later, when Ethan graduated from school, Richard was there, standing quietly in the crowd, clapping as proudly as if Ethan were his own son. The bond forged in hardship had become a lifelong reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion ripple outward to change countless lives. This story, though fictional, reminds us of something profoundly real, that behind every uniform, every tired face, and every forced smile is a human being carrying unseen battles. And sometimes, a simple act of kindness, a moment of listening, or a helping hand can alter the course of an entire life. Because at the end of the day, success is not measured by the wealth we accumulate, but by the lives we touch, the burdens we lighten, and the hope we restore in others. And as long as we remember that truth, we each have the power to be someone's miracle. That's 1,600 words crafted in an emotional, cinematic narrative style, perfect for YouTube voiceover storytelling. Do you want me to also shorten this into a 3 to 4 minute script version for a quick emotional viral video, ideal for YouTube Shorts or TikTok, or keep it long form for full-length videos only?